We'll begin with the presentation from Bob Miller and C. Rain Haney regarding errors in the water bills and steps taken to remedy the problem. In August, my office started receiving phone calls about bills that had not been sent by Sewerage and Water Board. People were concerned when they didn't receive their bills. They were extremely worried about incurring late fees and about being disconnected from their service. And then later on, we began receiving phone calls that the bills were much higher than the average bill, sometimes 3 times as much. I reached out to Sewerage and Water Board about those issues and met with the Deputy Director regarding 4,700 customers who were erroneously billed twice. At that time, Sewerage and Water Board agreed to take certain steps, including notifying the customers that the bills were in error, ensuring that they were not subject to a turn-off, and that any late fees would be erased, and that all accounts that were billed in error would be fixed by September 30th. So we're happy to have Sewerage and Water Board here again this morning, and I know a letter of explanation and apology went out to our residents. So I thank you for coming today, and I'd just like to ask a few questions, and I'll let you begin by telling us what caused the error and what are you doing to fix the problem.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to come here. I'm pleased to provide this update on our billing errors because I acknowledge how frustrating and time-consuming this is for our customers, and those customers that were affected by this error deserve better than what we provided to them. And so I'd like to talk about how we're fixing the problem and how we will do better for our customers going forward in the future. Again, this ties back to new software that was implemented in October 2016 to replace mainframe programs that were more than 30 years old. At that time, when we went live on the new system, our employees were trained and had been tested and certified before go live. When we went live, we saw our call volumes increase as the employees, with the release of the new bill format and the new capabilities, and the call wait times associated with those increased call volumes increased also as employees adapted to the new system. But the software operated as specified and designed. The errors that occurred are on us. And so with that, this more powerful system and its capabilities, frankly, yielded more opportunities for errors. Customers were assigned new account numbers and had to sign up for to use a new web portal. The interface between our customer service management system and the customer web portal and the customer phone portal, there were issues that arose at go live that took time for us to resolve. We also had issues with new customers as they moved in after another customer moved out. Those new customers did not immediately begin receiving bills. We also had manpower shortages in our meter reading department, which resulted in more estimated bills. And I want to take particular focus on one particular problem regarding errors in how we processed meter readings resulted in duplicate bills for certain customers. Those billing errors occurred on the customer accounts, and that happened across the city and relatively infrequently, but over a 4-month period, it happened between 4,600, 4,700 times. It happened when an actual meter reading was processed shortly after those customer accounts were billed based upon an estimated meter reading. The way the system works is on each day, if things go the way they're scheduled to go, we should be reading about 6,500 accounts a day, billing 6,500 accounts a day, mailing those bills, and then collecting payments on 6,500 accounts a day. On occasions where we had either manpower shortages or extended periods of inclement weather, the meter reading department would get behind, and this error occurred when the meter reading cycle was delayed and the readings arrived from the field at the same time when the account was being billed. And this error, again, caused for certain accounts to be billed for an estimated reading, and then on the same day billed a second time for an actual reading. This problem first occurred on April 5th. And when the problem first began occurring, no root cause could be identified. And frankly, we noticed it when the customers called us, and we acknowledged that it was a problem, and we went about fixing it, but we didn't know the cause. And that problem continued intermittently through July, when the overlap between meter reading schedules and billing schedules was identified. And then once we identified that, the schedule for the meter readings was adjusted, and the problem has not recurred. And so the last time that it occurred that we can determine was in July, and as of September 5th of this year, it was determined that 4,601 accounts had been affected by this error. And during the period from the first occurrence to the final occurrence of this error, there were 420,624 bills computed. And so this wasn't happening with much frequency, but when it did occur, it was terribly frustrating to our customers and very time-consuming for them and for us to get it resolved. And so with that, we met with Councilmember Ramsey, and as she mentioned, our affected customers were notified by mail. We told them that their bill was in error, that they would not be subject to turnoff while the error is being fixed, that they would not be subject to late payment penalties while the error was being fixed, and that the error would be fixed shortly. Of the 4,601 affected accounts, 2,044 have been corrected. I've got 5 employees working full-time and 20 employees working occasional overtime to make the remaining corrections, and the remaining 2,557 corrections will be completed. My intention is to have that by the end of this month, but certainly not later than Tuesday, October 10th. Again, I want to emphasize how much I regret the frustration and inconvenience caused to your citizens and our customers by these errors. We've got plans to make sure that these errors will not occur going forward as a result of improvements that we're making. We're intending to procure, as you know, an automated metering system now that the new customer service management system has been accomplished. To prepare for that, we received proposals to perform a readiness assessment. That assessment will be completed at the end of this year for presentation to our Board of Directors in January. There's about a dozen or so questions that I need this assessment to answer. And the key questions of that are to make sure that we agree what are the project goals and objectives for the automated metering project. My belief is this community would be best served if we looked at the big picture. As we built the backhaul network that would backhaul these meter readings, we could also backhaul a lot of other information on smart devices at that time. And so we're working cooperatively with the City Information Technology Department to determine how we could make this something that more than just Sewerage and Water Board gets benefit from. And so what are the network technologies that should be considered to backhaul this data? What's our readiness to implement the automated metering? Is our current budget estimate of just over $30 million, is that budget estimate adequate? Are we organized appropriately to support this? And what should our high-level implementation strategy be? A second thing that we're also working on is what I call our business transformation project. When I implemented the new billing system, we did so in keeping our existing processes as is. We felt that that provided the best stability to our employees and to the customers. But it's important now to come back and redesign those customer service business processes so that they're in accordance with industry best practices. We also intend to put a front end on this system, what's called a customer relationship management application that's similar to that used by the 311 Center to simplify and expedite our key customer service processes. What I want to do with this project in terms of project goals is very simple. I want to simplify the tasks that have to be done when serving a customer. I want to standardize our responses so that you don't get a different answer based on who picks up the phone at Sewerage and Water Board. I want us to be easy to do business with. I want us to be able to communicate the status of repair requests to our customers. And I want to have this implemented in 2018. To wrap up, I want to assure you that our employees are working with this complex new system and are resolving implementation issues that have arisen. Management is working cooperatively with civil service to hire meter readers, additional meter readers, and customer service reps. I want to emphasize that the customers and citizens deserve a better experience when doing business with Sewerage and Water Board. They deserve a better experience than what we're currently capable of delivering. And so with that, employees and management are committed to making the necessary improvements to provide that better experience. And we understand that there are customers that are still working through these billing issues. Our customer service representatives are prepared to assist them in person at our St. Joseph Street office. Many customers are finding it more convenient to take the quick trip across the river to our facility at Berman Place, and also we're able to handle them at our call center at 52 Water. In wrap-up, we acknowledge that we have made errors. We understand that how frustrating and time-consuming that is for the customers, and that we agree that those affected customers deserve better.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And, well, let me just first say committee members, council members Head, Gray, and Cantrell have joined us, and Council Member Susan Guidry is sitting with us also today. Thank you. And for those council members who just came, we started with item number 6, which was just a discussion. So we have not done any other matters on the agenda yet. Had you made the council aware that you had a shortage of meter readers before? Because this seemed like a very significant problem. And when you do your performance measures and customer service presentations, was that something you made us aware of?
No, ma'am, I had not made you aware of that. We have, there's a certain seasonality to employment in our meter reading department. It becomes a very difficult and frankly unpleasant job to do in the summer, and there's a tendency to lose a lot of meter readers. We lost more than we had expected earlier this year.
They're not permanent employees?
They're permanent, but they choose to find employment somewhere else after having worked that job for a while. It becomes more than many of them are willing to keep doing. And so we have a lot, that's a high turnover in our area, and I had not brought that to this council's attention. I thought that we were managing it effectively, but we had not.
Okay. So where are you now in terms of staff are they still going out? Or you haven't gone totally automated yet?
Oh, no, we have not gone totally automated, and we are reading as many meters as we can, but that level right now is about 70%. I had been able to we had been able to perform at reading about 98% of our meters consistently for several years, and it was only in the last few months that it had fallen off, and now we're down at about the 70% level, and I've got more than 5 vacancies, and we're working as fast as we can to get those filled.
Okay. And so these are the kinds of things that cause problems, and the problem arises, and then we don't know about it. And in this instance, it's not a day-to-day operational thing, but these are the types of issues that when you come before the council, we're not asking because we assume that you're operating with what you need and you're not telling us that you need assistance with it. So I would just implore you in the future, we have to know what's going on.
I understand, and we'll take that message back.
Yeah, but I appreciate your swiftness in meeting with me and getting the letter out to the customers? And just give us again the number that they can call with any questions.
The quickest route to reach us is simply by dialing 52 Water. They can also reach us on our website or come to our offices in person. And again, I apologize for inconveniencing them with this. We have identified those customers, and we believe that we will be able to take those particular issues to resolution without further requiring the customer's interaction. But if they're not comfortable believing that commitment that I'm making, they are certainly welcome to contact us, and we will talk them through it.
And they don't have to come down?
That's
Can
correct.
they handle it all by phone?
My intention is for these errors where customers were billed twice, that all of those will be resolved without the customer having to take any action at all. It's only if they have a question or concern that they might want to call us.
Okay, because initially some people were having to go to St. Joseph Street, and that was another issue. Okay, thank you.
It's my intention that customers will come downtown to St. Joseph Street as a matter of convenience for them, not convenience for us.
Certainly. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Head.
Thank you, Bob, for the information about the duplicate bills. My question is related to bills that are extraordinarily high. I started receiving about 5 months ago. I would say it rose to a crescendo level of constituents complaining about not just slightly high bills or maybe bills that were estimated for 2 months, but bills that were 5 to 7 times what they had normally been. Bills that were normally in the $100 range, $150 range, that had gone up to $750, up to $3,000. I'll give you 2 examples. One is a complaint that was reported on March 7, and again, this is about when I started getting the largest number of complaints, and it was not just onesie twosies, it was every single day we were getting complaints of bills that were 6 times larger than they had ever received before. I received another complaint that a bill was 5 times larger, and this is, again, these are just examples of dozens of bills that are complaints that I've received, 5 times larger than normal. When both customers called, they were told it was, quote, under investigation. But there has been no resolution for either customer, despite them. One started calling in March, and the other has started calling, I think, fairly recently. What is the process for getting your bill reviewed? Because, well, I guess, first, is there's an acknowledgement by the Sewerage and Water Board that many bills have been sent out with the wrong amount, the wrong billed amount on there? That's the first question.
I would say, yes, there have been bills that went out that were too high, that should not have gone out and should have been flagged and retained, because you and I would both agree that a cursory review would show that that bill had
was out of the ordinary and there was something wrong. Okay, so number one, bills have gone out. So if people hear this, they should know their bills have gone out that were too high and should have been flagged for investigation, but they went out anyway. So since they have gone out, if you believe you have a bill that is too high, like the 2 constituents that I'm using as an example for you today, they should contact the Sewerage and Water Board, correct?
That's correct. A normal variation in water bill might be 20% in either direction.
We're not talking about those. We're talking about some 10 times higher than $100-something bill that now are in the thousands.
That shouldn't have gone out, but since it did, we implore them, please contact us so that we can make it right.
Okay, and then that's my next question. So when they contact you and are told, quote, it is under investigation, close quote, what happens and what is an investigation? What does under investigation mean, number one? And number two, what should the constituent expect to happen? Because I'll just tell you, many feel nervous that they're not paying their bill and that somehow they're going to be sent to a collection agency because they didn't pay a bill that they knew was inappropriate, or that their water will be turned off, although we don't ever do that. So that they would be turned over to, I say that, I think the people who don't pay bills just don't pay bills.
No,
But people who care about their credit rating really don't want to be turned over to a collection agency.
I think that's an excellent question, but it's a very complex question, and I'd like to answer all parts
Please.
of it. First of all, we had suspended turnoffs for non-payment immediately before we went live on the new system, and we wanted to make sure that we did not resume turning off for non-payments until we were sure that the
Yeah, I think this group is more concerned about getting turned over to a collection agency, because we who've lived in New Orleans for a really long time don't believe that the Sewerage and Water Board really turns off water. We think we began
turning off. We began turning off again for non-payment in July, and so with that, let's talk about because typically about our prior to the new system, and we're working to restore back to this level, about 2,000 customers were turned off each month.
Ooh.
Okay, and that was something from years ago that had not happened. But in order for us to get our collection rate up, we had to enforce the rules.
Of course, I understand. But my question is, when something is placed, quote, under investigation because it's an abnormally high bill, what comfort does the constituent have that they are, A, not going to be turned over to a collection agency, and B, their water is not going to be cut off, and C, what is the timeline for resolution?
Okay. First of all, the term under investigation has a very specific meaning to us.
Tell me what that means.
And that is a commitment on our part that while the account is under investigation, that it is not subject to turn off or reporting to a collection agency. And
so let me just parse each little piece. So what assurance does the ratepayer have that the bill is in fact under investigation? They hear it from the lady on the phone, and I'm sure 99% of the time it is put in the under investigation section within the Sewerage and Water Board. But what assurance does the constituent have that's not going to be a he said, she said, should the system go wrong, the investigation system go wrong?
Okay. At this point, that communication is limited to verbal communication.
Okay. Are your staff members told to give their names or their badge number so that the constituent can write it down and say, you know, Jane Smith, badge number 337, told me on such and such a date that it was under investigation?
They provide names, but we do not have badge numbers to give.
Okay, as long as they give the names, because people want to have some type of proof, and if the best proof they can get is to take the name of the person that gave them the assurance, that at least gives them some comfort.
Okay, so under investigation specifically means that our collection process is put on hold while the issue that the customer has identified is investigated. Now, our standard for performance in this area has lagged dramatically because of two things. As meter readings came in late, there was less and less editing done. With less editing done, more erroneous bills went out. As more erroneous bills went out, more investigations had to take place. With more investigations take place, they took longer and longer and went from being a 1 to 2 week issue to a 1 to 2 or more months issue. And so with that, an employee that gets the final interpretation is supposed to contact the customer and say, this is what was found, and either this is the adjustment that will be made to your account to correct the error, or this is when the new your new due date would be. At that time, if the bill was a large amount and was deemed still payable, the customer has two choices. They can request a hearing with an independent third-party hearing officer, or they could make immediate payment arrangements, or they can make arrangements to make payments over time. And
what if the Sewerage and Water Board never contacts a constituent back?
if Sewerage and Water Board does not contact the constituent back, that's a failure on our part.
Yes.
And
Captain Obvious, yes.
And at that point,
But that's what happens. I know that your system makes sense. It sounds like you're dealing with a difficult problem, and you've set up a new arrangement to solve that problem. The concern, the real concern that has been borne out by reality and a history with the Sewerage and Water Board as ratepayers is that the system starts working. You get the call made to the person on the other line who says it's under investigation. The person who the constituent writes down the name, says it's under investigation, and then nothing happens. That's the fear that people have with the Sewerage and Water Board. What do they do when they hear nothing? Sometimes they'll hear something when your system goes right. When the system doesn't go right, what does a person do?
It is not reasonable for a customer to simply sit and wait.
Right.
And so at that point, ideally, my processes would either be resolved quickly or we would notify them. And if neither of those happen, I encourage the customer, don't wait in frustration. Simply call us back to see if there is more news and we simply failed to make the connection with you.
Okay, and I will tell you, I think that part of your system continues to break down, and my hope is that you would assign some staff member or staff members to almost act as a liaison for those problem cases. That's what our staffs have been doing on the city council, and we've had some success engaging with Sewerage and Water Board. So to those people that are out there, please contact your district council member or your at-large council member when you can't get that resolution that Mr. Miller has explained, of calling, explaining the problem, having your file put under investigation, writing down the name of the person who tells you that, following up in a few weeks, etc. If the system breaks down, certainly call your council members' offices, and we'll act as that helper to try to get you a resolution that makes sense. And if you don't like the resolution, allow you to get into the hearing process to be heard yet again. But I would suggest that you have some troubleshooters at the Sewerage and Water Board who can handle those more difficult cases, because I'm still dealing with my March case that has still not been resolved, despite Barbara Lacey Keller being one of the more tenacious people I know trying to get it resolved.
Sure. We have a service request contact center to do the follow-up on that. Unfortunately, when we have significant turnover, and again, many of these departments have turnover rates in excess of 30% per year. And as we have turnover, as we have gaps, we poach back from that service request contact center to keep.
What is the start? Okay, starting. What is the salary at 6 months for those positions?
It's my understanding that the salary after 6 months is somewhere between $10 and $11 an hour. And so, unfortunately, these are some of the lowest paid employees that we have, but we are working cooperatively with civil service as a result of a recent classification and compensation study to determine how we might bring those into a more market.
That makes sense to me, and but I will say at the same time, you need to seriously look at your pension system that benefits a few very highly compensated employees and doesn't benefit the lowest workers. Unfortunately, one of the local unions is advocating against the interest of, in real life, the interest of their membership, because the people who would benefit from a more rational pension system that was in line with national norms or even regional norms, the benefit would be that we would have more dollars free to, number one, invest in the lower paid employees, and number two, invest in infrastructure, and bad infrastructure negatively impacts poor residents more than it negatively impacts residents who have discretionary income to pay for new tires, etc. So I certainly, I laud you for working to improve the lower level salaries so that we can keep and retain, so that we can hire and retain employees. But I also think at the same time we need to make sure that that doesn't have a financial impact on the system that we cannot support. And the way you could resolve that is by reforming the pension system so that it makes more sense, and so that you are able to give more money to the lower paid employees while they are working, because many of them just cycle in and out of the system, and of course never take advantage of the incredibly lucrative Mac Daddy, Platinum, Rolls-Royce pension system that the Sewage and Water Board has.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cantrell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Councilmember Head really touched on some of the issues that I had to address with you this morning, the multiple and triple billing that seems to be a different population than the 4,601.
Yes, that's correct.
So how many within the multiple billing bucket are there?
In the multiple billing bucket, that's where we have we identified 4,601. But the ones that Councilmember Head was talking about, the higher bills,
right?
I don't have a usable statistic on that for you today, but those were the ones that came about as a result of erroneous meter readings submitted and processed.
No, that's true, and that is definitely an issue. But about 6 months ago, hearing from constituents about bills being tripled, I mean, we really do need to identify that universe. And are there red flags? I'm really just trying to understand how are we, are there red flags within the system that show you where there are bills that are off balance?
Yes, there are red flags. Any appropriate billing system, when it gets meter readings, would review those and compare that against past usage and would flag those. And one of the things that can happen on that is the billing rep can say that account should not be billed. This is clearly an error and they should not be billed until it's resolved. That results in a customer not being billed. A second thing would be if that they see the flags and say, we simply do not have the time to investigate all these, and they make the determination to release the bills. Neither of those circumstances is satisfactory, but these are decisions made by employees and by supervisors who or make mistaken decisions sometimes based on the shortages of staff. But with that, we should be able, when a customer gets an obviously erroneous bill, we should stop that, investigate it, and get a corrected bill out immediately. If that bill if the incorrect bill ends up in the customer's hands, the customer has the good sense to know what is a reasonable bill and what's not a reasonable bill. And if we have sent them an unreasonable bill, please and ask them, work with us, contact us. The difference between the two problems that we're talking about, one based off of a bad reading and one based off of an account that was billed twice, a bad reading will eventually correct itself on the next bill, even if the customer doesn't do anything.
No, it will not, because it's all when they do the estimates, and
Right.
the estimates are even more than the previous bill that you received.
You're correct, and that's where we are working to make sure that the bill doesn't go out wrong in the first place. The concern that I wanted to emphasize, though, is that double billing error, that would not have resolved itself, and that's why it was desperately important that we identify those, we notify the customers, and get those resolved. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer than to open up a bill, find an obviously incorrect amount, and know the inconvenience and time-consuming nature of our business processes to get it resolved. The commitment that I'm making is that we will work to get it resolved now, and we will work to make it better in the future.
So what does that look like? I mean, you mentioned staff. You said that the lack of adequate staff has caused for a lack of customer service and follow-through.
Right.
By representatives, but when do we see the light here? When are we going to get things addressed and correct the billing?
Right. The bills that are incorrect, the first thing that has to happen is the staffing. The next thing that has to happen is the improvement of our business processes, the simplification of them, and putting the customer relationship management front-end piece on that. The third piece is the automated metering piece. And all of these will be happening through the hiring of the staff happens in 17, the improved business processes and the customer relationship management application goes in early 18, and my intention is that the automated metering implementation would begin later in 18 and continue on until it was completed.
Okay, so based on all of the employment fairs and job fairs that have been conducted with Sewerage and Water Board, the resources allocated to hire up, the relaxation of the civil service rules and requirements, working through all these processes to make it easier for the Sewerage and Water Board to staff up. Why is it taking us so long? And why is that the reason for a lack of accurate billing to our people and the lack of customer service to help them through?
My belief is simply that the pay level that we're paying our employees right now is such that while many of them value the job, about 30% or more say, I'm going to try something else in less than a year. When we go to hire right now, for us to increase our overall staffing by one person, it typically requires us to hire 3 or 4 that for persons to increase, because we are seeing that for every 3 or 4 employees we're hiring, 2 or 3 are leaving just as quickly as they come in. And so what we have to do is create jobs at a market-based rate where someone says, I want to go to work there and I want to stay there.
But those changes were made, correct?
All the process changes were made, you're correct, except for the compensation piece. And that's what we're working closely with civil service on now. Because the compensation piece is, for some employees, it's simply, they say, I choose to pursue my future somewhere else. And so we have an enormous amount of turnover.
So what help can the City Council offer?
At this point, my belief is the customers and citizens are best served by the council through this committee holding regular accountability sessions with Sewerage and Water Board to review not only those 35 commitments that we made, but the overall program of metrics to determine, are we doing that which we say we are going to do, that which we're conducting, that we're truly conducting the business of Sewerage and Water Board. I believe the council serves best in holding us accountable.
Right, but we've been doing that in terms of having these regular meetings, but we're getting the same information. Right. And I'm just trying to figure out when are things really going to start to turn.
Right. And I think
and even with the level of accountability, us, the council, not being informed about the multiple billing, it's always after the fact, right. But yet we're the ones on the front line with the constituency to address concerns. I mean, it takes up the majority of my emails and complaints are Sewerage and Water Board related, and with the lack of a representative now to help move these complaints or these matters forward, it really does puts us at a disadvantage.
It is not a good use of the time of the elected officials of this community for Sewerage and Water Board to be performing at a level that requires that much of your time. A change is clearly needed.
Okay, I just have one other question.
If I could just interject something. When you talk about not being able to retain employees, that's the total opposite of what we've always been told, that the employees stay, that you don't have turnover, that you need new blood, you need to bring in new people. So this is kind of confusing.
It's what I call a barbell effect, that those that stay a long time, and that those that leave have a tendency to leave very quickly, such as in the first 3 years. And so you end up with a barbell effect of a number of employees who are very, very experienced, perhaps even nearing retirement, a bunch of employees that are very, very new, and relatively few in between.
Mr. Miller, I just have two other questions. In regards to the number of citizens that fall in the 4601, that was one issue with the multiple billing. And then you're going to determine how many residents have been impacted by the triple, quadruple billing. When will that assessment be completed?
I should be able to get you information within the next 2 weeks on that.
Okay. And based on your assessment, will you target those residents, particularly like where they live, where are they in the city of New Orleans, that could possibly aid you all in meeting them where they are instead of them having to come to St. Joseph? Or like, how can we better assist our residents when they're the ones that are being impacted significantly?
I think that is a very reasonable and appropriate request, and it's my intention in 2017. I was not successful in doing it, but it was my intention to create, just as I had a service request contract center, a billing request contact center, and it was my intention that that group would move through the community and meet the customers where they are, so that we would basically come to them by neighborhood. And so that was our plan. We haven't been successful in executing that, but the plan that you're talking about is very much on point and something that we should be doing.
I want to see citywide where are the problems, and are there some alignments there, in terms of what neighborhoods, that sort of thing. And just to follow up from the last time you were here, I had reported about issues with getting both residential and commercial customers hooked up to sewer and water lines, where it had been taking 3 to 6 months, holding up projects, killing projects in midstream. Where are we with that?
Those projects go through our plumbing department, and I have worked with them diligently to review and remove bottlenecks there. And if you identify any further problems with that, please bring those to my attention as quickly as possible, because I believe we've got that resolved, and if we haven't, I want to still be working on it.
Very good. And what's your relationship with the Sewerage and Water Board? How long will you be around? Like, what's your role?
Right now, I'm serving as interim executive director, and I will be there for 3 more weeks. On Friday, August 4th, I accepted a job pending confirmation by the City Council in Jackson, Mississippi, to serve as their Director of Public Works, a job very similar to the role.
So I should lobby Jackson to disapprove you, the council? We should send a resolution to ask them to not approve you so we can keep you a little longer? Thanks for...
Councilmember Head, it has been one of the most wonderful things in my life to have the privilege to live in this city and to serve the customers. And it grieves me that my last time here is reporting to you about failures, because I was so much, after 8 years of doing my best, would like to have been able to say it was accomplishments. But the citizens deserve better than what they're having right now.
Sure.
And so I will be here for 3 more weeks, but New Orleans will always have my heart because of how wonderful I was treated while I was here. And I will work to make sure that a good transition takes place so that the ball isn't dropped on these issues.
What does that transition look like?
I wish I knew more at this time. There are folks who are diligently working on this. What has happened is that we have got an interim emergency management support team in place, headed up by Paul Rainwater, and they brought in very, very talented people to keep us going through November 30th. with my departure, there will need to be named another interim executive director and an interim chief financial officer. The Sewerage Water Board of Directors has kicked off a selection process for a recruiter, a national recruiter, to begin recruiting for the positions of executive director, general superintendent, and chief financial officer. But those processes are closer to the beginning than they are to the end. And in the meantime, the most important decisions will be to continue with competent and qualified people in interim roles so that can continue. It was a wonderful privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
To be here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gray.
One or two irrelevant questions. First, where are you from, Mr. Miller?
I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, which I often describe as the black and white part of the Wizard of Oz.
For what it's worth, Jackson, Mississippi is my third favorite city. I have a lot of friends there. I'm not going to repeat the questions that some of the other council people have asked, and the fact that I don't repeat it do not mean I don't have the same concerns.
Yes, sir.
I've heard your answers. But I will say this. I've had a number of calls about people who got bills that couldn't have made sense, and you've talked about those bills. And one of the things is when they have called, a large number report just a hostile tone in terms of the person who talks to them. I guess there are two problems. First of all, you have a bill that seems out of sorts. You can't pay. At the very minimum, the person on the other end needs to greet you with a
sense of dignity,
sensitive ear and a sense of dignity. And there needs to be a real effort in that. When you hear it once or twice, you dismiss it as the natural reaction of someone who's just gotten a bill they can't pay. But when you hear it over and over, you begin to think that there's some substance to that. Have you heard those complaints, and are you making an attempt to deal with them in any way?
I have heard those complaints, and where we've got specific complaints, our calls are recorded, and there have been occasions where employees have been disciplined or their employment has been terminated as a result of rudeness. And to me, it is unacceptable on the part of anybody in public service, particularly those that report to me, that they would do anything other than greet the customers with courtesy and respect.
It would do me all the good in the world to get reports on employees who are disciplined for their behavior, because again, the guy who sees him or herself as a little guy feels like government thinks they can treat him any kind of way and there are no repercussions. And I would like to be able to say with certainty, I don't need particular names, that X number of people were disciplined in a certain way in a certain period of time because of that kind of behavior. So if you can...
I will work to get you that information. Typically what happens is usually when someone is making the decision that this job isn't for them, that they're not willing to do it, sometimes that manifests itself in an inappropriate attitude right before they leave. But I will get you the information you're requesting and continue to emphasize to our employees that they are there to serve the public with dignity and respect.
Thank you. You mentioned the inability to retain people partly because of pay. What is the starting pay for, I guess there are a lot of different jobs, but say the base level meter reader, for example. Do you know what that person starts with?
I don't have that specific number, but I believe that it is in the range of $11 to $12 per hour.
Okay. All right. And is that about the same range for that entry-level person answering phone calls?
I believe that their rate is more like $10 or $11 an hour.
I agree with you and them that we, while that's above what we have passed, as raising the minimum wage, but I agree that that is not a number that a person can support a family on. And I guess we have that problem in many places in City Hall, and we need to, try to figure out how to solve it.
Yes, sir.
However, and I know someone else talked about this, we keep getting reports on the large number of people who are not working, some of whom I think would take a job for $11 an hour. And it seems to me that we must not be, and I say we, I'm not just talking about Sewerage Water Board, I'm talking about a lot of places in the city. We must be doing an inadequate job of getting the word out that there are some jobs available, and or dealing with the process by which you get one of those jobs if you choose to apply. And I know we've had some efforts at the council level that are being mentioned here to deal with that, but we're going to have to take a second look at our efforts, and I guess we need our departments and those who are not really technically our departments to give us advice on why we are falling short in that effort.
I agree with you completely. The math doesn't seem to work with the levels of unemployment that we see in the community and the levels of vacant positions at Sewerage and Water Board. The math doesn't seem to work, and so we're working very closely with civil service to get those problems resolved.
Do you have any idea on all levels the total number of jobs at Sewerage and Water Board that are vacant right now?
I don't have a specific number, but I believe that it's very close to 300.
Very close to 300.
Yes, sir.
Vacant jobs. If you can get to us a listing of those 300 jobs in the very near future, and I guess if you can get it to us in a list that includes starting salaries.
Yes, sir.
That might be very useful to all of us in the city and the citizens of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And these are good jobs. Well, the pay is not quite at market level. Working for a utility, I've worked for utilities for 35 years, and it provides for a good life.
Councilmember Brissett.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ramsey. Mr. Miller, thank you for being here. Just to go some questions along the same lines. My office has sent a running list of about 49 issues, some that we've shared with Sewerage and Water Board in the administration since January. These issues range from more recently billing issues, as well as poor repaving. Often gravel is laid out for months, broken water mains, leaks. Why does it take 8 months to resolve these issues? How can you improve the timeline before you leave? Because it's not acceptable to constituents. It's a public safety and quality of life issue for all citizens of the city.
It shouldn't take that long, and it represents a failure when that happens. And candidly, my ability to make meaningful changes on that in the next 3 weeks will be fairly limited. But it's my intention to make sure that we have the resources. We need to align them to make sure that those issues are taken care of. This council voted for the water and sewer system, the necessary resources.
Last council.
What's that?
Last council, 2012.
Thank you for that correction. And we have the necessary resources for the water and sewer system, and those need to be aligned and applied to get those problems resolved.
As it relates to customer service, why doesn't employees have a badge number that citizens can reference when they call? I get reports that, I've heard reports that employees can't get a name, employees won't give a name to the citizens when they call?
If a customer asks for a name and does not receive a name, if they let us know, we can go back and find out who it was that talked to them, and we can go back and review that call. And if the employee did not identify themselves, they will be disciplined. And so with that, what I'm trying to do is, rather than give a badge number, I want to give a resolution number like what you get when you call 311, so that we can track it that way. The other thing I want to do is that the first call comes from the customer. I want my processes to be so that all the remaining calls come from us to the customer, so that all the notifications do not require any further action on their part. So I'm not looking for the badge number as much as I am the incident number, so that they can track that and anybody can follow it.
Well, yeah, I think we're thinking along the same line. The resolution number that you suggested should be tied to the employee
Yes.
taking the incoming call.
Yes, sir.
What if a customer does not want estimated billing?
Okay.
I mean, I Entergy New Orleans, I want them to charge me for what I pay for. And I think a lot of citizens throughout here, especially our seniors, I don't want you to estimate, because right now I could bet a bunch of this city doesn't trust the estimation.
Right. My belief is on an ongoing basis, somewhere between 95 to 98% of our bills should be based off of actual readings. We were there month after month after month for the last 5 years, and then only within about the last 6 months has it fallen off. And when it fell off the table. And so I agree with you that customers should be able, and until we have the automated metering system, I can't commit to 100%, but I believe that we should be able to do with our existing processes, restore our staffing levels, and get back up to 95 to 98%.
And in your mind, what's the timeline on that implementation?
My belief is that should be happening within the next 90 days, because it'll take about that long to hire the employees and get them trained up.
The other question I have, the last time you appeared before the committee, myself and other council members brought up the issue of customers being charged if they pay their bills online. What is the status of that, and have y'all worked through it?
That made such a significant impression on me that we went back and made changes right away on that, and right now I don't recall the exact fee schedule, but I do know that the fee schedule is a zero on most everything, and where it's not, it is identical to the fee schedule charged by Entergy. But we made the changes that you had committed to, that we'd committed to you for.
So you don't have that fee schedule with you?
No, sir, but we will report that back to you after this committee meeting. That you left me with a very clear understanding, and we've fulfilled the commitment that we made to you.
So billing online, you're telling me, is that a reduced cost or is that zero?
My belief is that for debit cards and electronic checks, it's zero, and for credit cards, I believe it's $2.95.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Councilmember Head.
I had a follow-up. I sent a letter, and I didn't ask for a response. I thought it was would have been obvious, but that I was looking for a response, but I never got one. It was directed to the Emergency Management Support Team, and I sent it to Robert Turner, CC, the mayor, who's the president, all the board members, and all the members of the Interim Emergency Management and Support Team. And these committee meetings are great opportunities, huh? Oh, I sent it on August 25th, 2017. One of the things that I try to do is to consistently say the same thing and not get on the popular bandwagon when everybody realizes it's an issue. I try to say the same thing on a regular basis so that we don't get into a crisis. Unfortunately, this is sort of a post-crisis backwards look at what we haven't done. But even though I wrote this letter on August 25th, 2017, I haven't gotten a response, and it has to do with the fact that we've known, and I say we, I don't mean, and I know, I really want to make sure you understand, you are the person here before us today, and you're having to take all the heat and all of the questions. I know that you and many members of your staff have been working to improve the Sewage and Water Board on a regular basis, but larger groups of people, elected officials, Sewage and Water Board members, members of the public, member of the media, have not consistently focused on the problems and mandated that we all work together to fix it. And we have known since the report on operations for 2015 prepared by Black & Veatch for the Sewage and Water Board, which was published on October 20, 2016, that the Sewage and Water Board had inadequate staffing in most departments. We actually knew that before then. And they said, quote, a significant portion of SWB&O's leadership will retire in the next 5 years. That's in addition to the staffing problems that we know we have at the lower level the lower level positions. Delays in hiring are hampering the organization's ability to keep the city safe. I attached the vacancy report and reviewed the 345 open positions. And if you look at that, it shows that there's no single reason why those positions have not been filled. For example, there are many high-level positions for which there are very few eligible applicants, or in some cases, none at all. For positions with fewer required qualifications, there are scores, if not hundreds, of qualified applicants for positions that still remained unfilled. The challenge seems to boil down, again, if you just read the literature, the studies, the information that we've had for years, there are few or no qualified potential employees residing in Orleans Parish. The pay is too low for highly qualified positions, or there are vacant positions the Sewage and Water Board just has not filled. And Black & Veatch, as well as members of the media, have asked questions about whether or not we have particular problems that we could solve with some work and some collaboration between the administration, the Sewage and Water Board, the staff of the Sewage and Water Board, and the council working with civil service, for example. So, for example, immediately the domicile policy. Immediately following Hurricane Katrina, the Sewage and Water Board suspended the policy required all employees to reside within Orleans Parish. The suspension was reversed by, and I voted for this reversal, by the council in 2013 once the population had stabilized to bring the Sewage and Water Board in line with other city departments. In light of the current crisis at the Sewage and Water Board, it may be time to revisit this policy. Again, this is not a new discussion. This has been pushed and questioned by Black & Veatch. It's been questioned by other people who have studied the Sewage and Water Board, and it's even been asked of us by the media. If there are hard-to-fill, highly specialized positions within the Sewage and Water Board, it makes sense that the organization should be able to seek qualified talent from neighboring parishes. If there is an appetite for this change, I will be glad to work on legislation to move it forward. So for a month, the people who are supposed to hire to keep us safe have had an earnest offer by a council member at large to solve a problem, if in fact it is a problem, or to dismiss it as not a problem and to solve the problem in another way. Yet they've done nothing to contact me to try to solve this problem. So I'm sorry you're the one that's receiving the brunt of my ire. I'm delighted that you are strong enough to be here today for that, because I know this is a difficult position. But to Mr. Turner, to Mr. Rainwater, to the people who are now in charge of the Sewage and Water Board, to the newly minted members and the members who have served on it for a long time, if you are having trouble hiring, particularly for the highly qualified positions for which there are very few applicants, and that difficulty would be reduced by changing the domicile policy, even in an interim basis because of the dire situation we're in, speak now. If it is a salary issue, particularly for the lower paid employees. Work with civil service, and if you hit a stumbling block, if you hit a roadblock, reach out to us, because part of our job is to help the Sewerage and Water Board push civil service to increase the salaries so that they match the market demand. If you cannot fill the positions, obviously one of the problems is that they are too low paid if you have if there are not highly skilled or difficult requirements for people to meet. Let's see. Then again, I mentioned specifically the Human Resources and Civil Service Department. It's my understanding that they've worked with Civil Service, and the Sewerage and Water Board have worked ostensibly to address staffing problems that the organization faces. Civil Service claims in some fairly strongly worded letters to have instituted a delegated hiring process which allows the Sewage and Water Board to screen and qualify applicants for positions unique to the Sewage and Water Board. Nevertheless, many vacant positions, again, not highly qualified positions where you need a PhD in water management, they have not been filled. Clearly, there remains a breakdown in the Sewage and Water Board and Human Resources and the Civil Service Coordination. And I take that from a letter written by Michelle Craig to the directors of the Sewage and Water Board. And I ask him, as he meets with the administration, fellow members of the interim management team, the Sewage and Water Board Civil Service, I ask him to include in the discussion a plan of action to fill immediate open positions for which there are eligible applicants. Again, according to the Black and Veatch report and according to the reports that we have on vacant positions, there are eligible applicants. We need an action plan and a commitment to fill those vacancies within 30 to 60 days. Now, this went out on August 25th. I've heard a whole lot of nothing. It's now September 26th, so they're 31 days into my expectation as an at-large council member that they solve this problem of hiring for positions for which there are applicants and the jobs are open within 30 to 60 days. We're already day 31, and it looks like nothing has done, and nothing's been done, and nothing has changed. So I say that to say, we're not new to this problem or this discussion. It's Groundhog Day. We continue to have the same discussions with the media, politicians, Sewage and Water Board members, Black and Veatch, constituents, etc., throwing out perceived problems, some that are well-founded because they actually studied the problems, and some just because it seems intuitively to be ways to solve the problems, such as, particularly for the highly skilled employees, suspension of the domicile requirement. For the lower skilled employees, increase in the salary, as well as resolving whatever roadblock there is with civil service to quickly fill those positions for which we have applicants. But the action step has not been taken. We only can evaluate what the problems are based on the studies that have been done by people who know better than us on a day-to-day basis. They have laid it out as to how to solve the problems or rational ways that they believe we can solve the problems. But we as a council cannot make the interim management team do it. So they need to come back to us. Mr. Turner and Mr. Rainwater need to come back to us and say, these are the things that we need your help with to be able to hire people in a timely, in a quick fashion. Or if they don't need our help, wonderful, we've all got plenty to do. But they need to do it. Now we're on 31 days of my offer to help. I've heard nothing, and they still haven't done their job.
I regret that you did not receive a response back, but please allow me to assure you.
I didn't send it to you, so you're not in trouble.
What's that?
It wasn't directed
Okay.
to you, so you're not in trouble. The highly compensated strike team that we've brought in to solve all of our problems should have either fixed it. I don't need a response back. This is not about me. Either they fix it or they ask for my help.
And my belief
Neither has
proof
happened.
will be in the pudding if we resolve this. But let me tell you very, very quickly how we're going about this. We're focusing on 3 issues in 3 departments. The issues are that have been barriers in the past was market-based compensation, certification versus civil service testing, and the domicile requirement. On that last issue, I am against lifting the domicile requirement except for those positions where we've demonstrated that we have not been able to accomplish that. But we're focusing on 3 departments: our power and pumping department, our facilities maintenance department, and our engineering department. And we're working very closely with civil service. And we'll work to get you a status update on this, but my belief is that we will be able to move forward on the pay, certification, and domicile issues for power and pumping, facilities maintenance, and engineering within that 30 days that you've indicated.
Councilmember Guidry.
Thank you. It's really hard to, come in last year and pile on some more. But I know where the people of the city are right now with regard to the Sewerage and Water Board. What the Sewerage and Water Board has put us through in the last couple of months, on top of what the Sewerage and Water Board has put their customers through, just on a continual basis. So I'm thinking it's hard to imagine. I mean, you're leaving in a few weeks. There's some kind of team in, but they're not responding to council member letters. That the systemic failure of the Sewerage and Water Board that we've seen over the last number of years is not going to continue. In 2012, I believe it was, we, at great risk to our political reputations, did as the Sewerage and Water Board asked and said was absolutely needed, and created annual rate hikes for water and sewer. A big part of that was supposed to be customer service.
Yes, ma'am.
I just distinctly remember going over and over at that meeting how often we got, and this is in 2012, constituent complaints of just terrible customer service at the Sewerage and Water Board, people who were rude, people who hung up on the customers, people who wouldn't get back to them. They never get their solutions to their problems. And doesn't that sound like today to you? And that was 5 years ago, and many rate hikes ago.
I'm concerned that we may be performing worse than we were then.
Yes, I know. And in the last year or two, I've told the mayor's people, the Sewerage and Water Board is it seems to be falling apart. So, then of course, there's the problem with the pumps and the power. And what I see is the Sewerage and Water Board who has, over the years, come to be an entity of itself, unto itself, who has hidden flaws that continue to mount, who has basically, what do you call it? Flipped their nose at the public and thumbed their nose. Thank you. And I know I was mixing that up with something.
We're a council of mixed metaphors, so it's all okay. A city of mixed metaphors.
At the public and at the council and apparently the mayor. So I don't know how to believe that there's any different. And I got to tell you, didn't we just recently, within the last year, authorize millions of dollars in overtime because you had a lack of people.
Yes, ma'am.
And you say that this software was implemented in October 2016. Apparently, and this is a management issue, you say you certified your people and trained them, but then things still went all wrong. And surprise, you had new call volumes because it was a new system. Shouldn't that have been, figured out ahead of time? Should have been planned for ahead of time? That's management failures to me.
Yes,
and that's
ma'am,
what I see across the board is management failures and people who have become just very arrogant over time in believing that they could have a system at 50% capacity and not warn residents of that during hurricane season. I mean, just incredible arrogance. And so I just, and now you're still over 300 people short. We heard that about a year ago, I think, when we did this ridiculous amount of overtime. And meanwhile, the IG's doing reports that say there are people being paid for working 25 hours in a day at the Sewerage Water Board. I don't see how we can trust any management at the Sewerage and Water Board. And now we've got new management that doesn't even answer the letters from the council people. So that is very concerning. So I got to say, I don't think people are going to be willing to hear any mention of increased costs. No. For instance, to pay for your complaints, customer service people to make a decent living. I thought that was all in the rate hikes that were happening on an annual basis. And I think customers, they don't want to even hear about any higher costs until we do a complete forensic audit. Where has all of the money gone? From FEMA, from the rate hikes? I understand the drainage wasn't involved in those rate hikes, and I try to explain that to people that's in a millage, and we have to look at that too and look at what needs to be done there. But not a dime. Nobody should even whisper the idea of any increases until there is a complete forensic audit by somebody that everybody is comfortable with. So I don't know, there's no questions you can answer here. I just have to say what I think everyone is feeling and that I think that we need to express on their behalf. And, I'm looking at an email from the then Lakeview president, I believe. It was from August of 2016. August, not after the new billing started, but in August of 2016, I believe they sent us a list of 100 or so people in Lakeview who had seriously high bills. And this was before the new system.
That's correct.
And
I worked with you on that, and we contacted each
yes,
of those
you
customers
did. And
back.
you went to the LCIA meeting, and you brought people there who could, with you, to respond immediately to people, and I appreciate that. But I mean, it didn't start with the new billing system. That was probably part of being understaffed, seriously understaffed. And I read the civil service letters, and they were very down to minute detail of how it was not civil service's problem. And I believe them because as Councilmember Brossette said, it's not just bills, it's not just what we've learned about the water, the drainage system, but it's repairs of leaks and always blaming either the customer or the Department of Public Works.
Or civil service. And you will not hear
yes.
words of blame come forward again on that.
So, I'm just thinking we need a total restructuring of the Sewerage and Water Board, and I don't think I can trust anybody who's been involved with it for any long term. Forgive me for that, because, because those people behind the curtain had to have known that we were one turbine away or less from drowning again, and they didn't tell us. They didn't tell the public, and that's just totally inexcusable to take people's lives in your hands like that. So, I'm just saying that. Thank you.
Councilmember Brissett.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ramsey. And just to follow up, is this, in your eyesight, is this a domicile issue or a outreach issue? There are a lot of qualified people in this city who want to work. They are highly. Let me finish. There are highly skilled positions that many in this city never know about, and that has to change. We can't keep passing up on qualified people in the city when there are open, highly skilled positions available. It sends a bad message to the city that, you know, you could only go for low-paying jobs. So that's one of the main things I want to see change, besides the bureaucratic mess that, you know, y'all are a public agency that's supposed to administer services to the public, but these highly skilled positions, people are being passed up in this city, and I think it boils down to an outreach issue.
I agree with you completely. With very few exceptions, I do not believe that this is a domicile issue. I believe that this is a recruitment issue. Absolutely. My belief is that there was a time when there was an abundance, a preponderance of applicants wanting to come to Sewerage and Water Board. That is not the case now, and when there was an abundance of applicants, then the human resources processes were around screening that abundance of applicants down to the best few. But now, in the absence of that abundance, now we need to pivot. We need to change and become one that focuses on recruiting and going out into the marketplace and bringing folks in. Part of that is compensation, but a lot of it is, as you said, simply outreach. We have to be more effective at doing that outreach so that the citizens that work here, or the citizens that live here, can also work here.
Yeah, that is, just to follow up, that is one of the main issues I hear out in the public, besides the services, is that with all the jobs that y'all have vacant in current positions, when they come available, people can't get work, and we have a unemployment issue in this city, and I think it's best to make sure that this outreach, employment, recruiting issue is at the top of the list with everything else.
I agree.
But I'll just have to add to that, because I've held several job fairs, and in collaboration, I think Councilmember Head, and we held one in Central City. We had hundreds of people there standing in the line for Sewerage and Water Board, but they were limited on what they could apply for. You know, so the people are here, and the people do respond, but it's just an overall management issue. We have a long way to go.
I agree. But the math doesn't work to have that many vacant positions and that much unemployment.
That's what I just can't, I don't understand. And we've done.
We have to get that resolved.
We do.
And we have to get it resolved with citizen employees.
So what is the plan for that?
My belief at the plan right now, at the very highest level, is that you will be replacing the chief executive officer, the general superintendent or chief operating officer, and chief financial officer. And as you do that, as you replace those executive positions, you have to make sure that they are focused on this change agenda that accomplishes what you've laid out here today. fill the vacant positions, provide a better customer experience, provide more reliable drainage services. And that my belief is with that change out of the executive leadership team, you'll be able to accomplish that.
But what are we going to do between now and that team being found and brought in and vetted and hired? What are we going to do as far as the 300 and something vacant spots, and you can't read meters because there's not enough people, and customer service people are testy because there's not enough of those?
I think that the most significant change, and this is one that can and is happening now, is a pivoting of the relationship between Sewerage and Water Board and the civil service. It would have been difficult to not see occasions where that relationship was rife with conflict over the last year or two, and we have pivoted so that we're working collaboratively and cooperatively with them. We believe that we can achieve success with them without being in conflict with them. And so we believe that we can get those positions hired in that relationship.
So how many will be hired in the next month?
My belief, my understanding is that in a typical month, there are 30 to 40 people hired each month. The question then is, of those 30 or 40, how much leave at that same time, so that how much can we result in a net increase?
Mr. Miller, thank you for coming today. I'm very concerned about some of the things you talked about, the recruitment, because we've heard for a couple of years about all of these open positions, and then the issue of pay and domicile and certification come up. I'm not inclined to listen to any of that. I would ask you to send me, and we've asked for it and never received it, the jobs that are open and what you're looking for. And, whatever efforts we can make in conjunction with the light effort that's being made at Sewerage and Water Board, obviously, to fill those positions. So, thank you, Rain, for the presentation this morning. We wish you the best as you move on.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll certainly miss you. I have some speaker cards. Tillman Hardy.
While they're coming up, I forgot one thing. I read that there was in the statute when they had the council people come off the board, that they required some quarterly reporting and written report from the Sewerage and Water Board to the council, and it appeared that had not been done. Is that correct?
I didn't hear your question.
Quarterly reporting, that's in the statute.
There was a combination of monthly, quarterly, and annual reporting, and I will check back and verify the status of those.
Those were the
Written reports?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, they came. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Hardy. I'm sorry, Councilmember Cantrell.
No, I was just wondering, Madam Chair, if the administration would give us an update or planning to give us an update today about how the assessment process is going. That's aligned with the Sewerage and Water Board. Is that
That's
a part of it?
That's an agenda.
Okay. All right. Very good. That's the catch basins piece. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Hardy.
Yes, hi, I'm Tillman Hardy, concerned citizen. A couple of questions. One, you answered a lot I had
2 minutes, please.
about, you had answered a lot of the questions that I had about the shortage of employees and so forth, so I won't go over that. In terms of the smart meters, are you looking at condominium complexes, multifamily, and large apartment complexes as partnering with them for sub-metering of apartment units?
Am I permitted to respond?
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Not at this point. At this point, we were planning on only focusing on one-to-one, where there is already a meter, to replace that with a smart meter. That's not to say that we couldn't do that. It just hasn't been part of our plans yet.
I'd like to recommend to the council that you heavily consider, as you look at the usage of smart meters, you look at the sub-metering potential of multifamily units. Basically, when there's a lot of overage at apartment complexes and condo complexes, it's because nobody cares about how much water they spend. They could run a shower all day and they won't be charged for it. So this would help with that immensely. The other thing is a water efficiency program that could be run like the Energy Smart program to help subsidize water efficiency improvements in residential structures. Is that something that's on the horizon?
Mr. Hardy, why don't you give us your question? Your time is up. You've done 4 minutes.
Those were the two questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Tim Garrett.
While Mr. Garrett comes up, I'd just like to mention another one of my letters that I wrote, and I'm trying to find it right now. It's to the Sewerage and Water Board regarding, it's to the mayor regarding a water audit. There are, Tillman, you might want to look into this. There are companies that do water audits to find out where we have broken or slow meters or where we have water loss that isn't explainable by just a leak in the street. The Sewerage and Water Board many years ago actually hired a company to do this, which resulted in about $1.4 million in annual increase in 1991 and $756,000 in an annual increase in revenue in 1996. So, all of these areas of failures of the Sewage and Water Board need to be looked at. I believe hotels were one of the worst offenders of the low meters, the slow meters, as well. Just to mention on the conservation issues, again, I wrote a letter to the mayor. I think that this would be a great idea. They basically eat what they kill. It's a third party who comes in to look at how we could properly meter and not make mistakes. And if there is a benefit in that to the Sewage and Water Board, they get a percentage and then we get the rest, and then the bills are theoretically going to be proper henceforth. But also, we don't meter, or we may not meter. I don't know what the answer is since I left the chairmanship of the committee, but and I left the Sewage and Water Board, but I know that we used to not even meter certain entities, governmental entities, and I don't know if that has completely changed. There were schools that the meters were completely turned off. We weren't metering the sheriff's department, some of his buildings. Again, I don't want to get into that today because I know that's not really on the agenda. But as you said, Tillman, if you don't know what you're using and you're not having to pay something for it, you're more inclined to waste. So even if we just metered these entities, even if we didn't bill them, or if we billed them, but maybe we decided to bill them at 50% of the normal rate, they would be inclined to be more careful about their usage. So that's another subject that we need to push in the near future as soon as we deal with the crisis right now, which is that we are afraid of flooding and we are billing our citizens inappropriately. But the next needs to be metering every single user, charging every single user if we all agree that that is appropriate. And then finally, the water audit, which could catch the slow metering and would bring dollars immediately into the Sewage and Water Board.
And it's my commitment to you that that I will leave a recommendation to fund a water audit. We had attempted to do that with internal staff. We were not successful.
Well, yes, because that was a silly plan. You believed you were much more bullish on the ability of the organization to do it itself. We can't. We need a third party to do it that is incentivized by making money on it and then turn over their data to us so that then hopefully a better run system will never get in a position where we need a water audit again.
We agree.
Good morning. Tim Garrett. My office is at 3146A Calhoun Street in the middle of the heart of Marleyville neighborhood. I really didn't plan on speaking today. I thought you'd have a packed house and I wouldn't get any questions in, but here, I'll try to do it in my time. If I go a little bit over, I hope you'll forgive me. I'm sort of a slow speaker. It was amusing to hear you reference bills that fell in the range of 2, 3, maybe 4 times the normal, when I often run into residents who are experiencing 10, 20, 30, even 50 times their normal monthly usage. Just this morning on my way to the bus, a resident pulled alongside me and said, "Tim, I just got a bill for $7,000. And this is the neighbor of someone who just got a $6,000 bill a couple of months ago, which took quite a long time to resolve. The problem here, I don't think, is so much a personnel issue as a computer programming issue. Those bills should never have made it out of the door. It's one thing to receive a bill that's $100, $200 over your normal, but not in the thousands. A lot of New Orleans residents don't have that kind of money sitting in the bank, and that can not just ruin your day, but your life. So I thought I would touch on a few points, and then if you have any questions for me, feel free.
Mr. Garrett, I'm going to have to ask you to start wrapping up.
The problem here is with the estimated billing, I think, in large part. It shouldn't happen at all, but if it does, it shouldn't happen more than once or twice. We're seeing customers sometimes get 6 estimated readings in a row. Those are the people with multiple $1,000 bills, and then they do appeal the process. They go through the review, and they're told it's under review. But one of the dirty little secrets Mr. Miller hasn't touched on is that at the end of the review process, you still might be told you owe that charge, and your only recourse is to then approach the legal department at Sewerage and Water Board and then be told, we can forgive it. Whereas the agency by state law cannot just forgive an overbill like any other utility might. They can't just say, sorry, we goofed up. You actually have to appeal to their lawyers, who can then say, we forgive you. So the bills are way out of line. I think when estimated bills are issued, there should be a mandate that it's not allowed to be over 100%, namely equal to that customer's historical monthly rate. There's no reason a single household should ever get a bill for over $1,000 if they've been paying $130 for the last 20 years. The burden of proof should be on the Sewerage and Water Board, not the ratepayer. People should not have to get on the phone 100 times or go to St. Joseph Street to have to do anything. The board should identify the problem, come to the ratepayer, inspect the property for leaks for free, and then resolve it on their behalf without any input from consumers. Along those lines, I just want to close with a bit of procedural policy that I think the board should adopt. I think they should have a dedicated consumer advocacy office who does nothing but customer outreach, completely. Resolving complaints of this nature, and it shouldn't take months to do so. I think that concludes the brunt of my appeal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Anastasia Symes. And then Bethany Goddard, is it? I can't read the last name.
Council members, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Anastasia Symes. I know many of you just through my participation through the Mid-City Business Association. I'm now a proud homeowner in the Tulane Canal neighborhood, and I'm a part of that neighborhood association as well. So I'm actually here to speak briefly on my own personal experience. As a first-time homeowner here in New Orleans, I was very excited, and then 2 minutes isn't even enough time to explain to you everything I've been through. But basically, October 2016, I purchased my home, and I have yet to receive a competent bill. In March, I received a bill for $500. It took 17 months to resolve, and it really wasn't actually resolved. It was just once upon a time, it just disappeared. I spend about an hour or more every month calling, emailing, or coming down in person, and my personal time being spent on just wanting to pay my fair share. A couple of things I would like to point out is that the water usage graph does not match up, and every time I call in and trying to ask somebody to walk me through it, I've been told to disregard it. Every time I call in to ask about an update on my bill, I'm told to be patient. I think 17 months is beyond patient. I've lost my patience. I have not received an actual bill for a few months now, and because of that $500 bill, I'm receiving overestimated bills. I cannot get a response. I cannot get an actual meter reading. I purchased my home. I have low-flow toilets, very energy-efficient appliances. I have brand-new plumbing. I know that I do not spend thousands and thousands of gallons of water on a monthly basis. In addition, I would just like to comment that we were asking earlier, is there a charge for making payments online? Gentleman I was sitting next to pointed out that there's currently a $4 amount for credit cards and 50 cents for checks. Thank you.
That's not correct.
And I'll ask Mr. Miller to speak with you before you leave. Bethany? Tell me the last name.
Garfield, like cat.
Garfield, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have very good handwriting. Yeah, obviously the overbilling's been a problem for a long time. I am a renter. About, I guess it was last summer, maybe June or July, my landlord started getting bills that were about 5 times larger than they had been. And here's the thing, when you do actually get an investigator to come out, the investigation is not thorough. What happened in my case, essentially when she showed up, there was a toilet running, which is not a persistent problem. She came, the toilet was running, she decided that was the cause of a plus $600 bill, and then left and said, too bad, you're going to have to pay it. Now, you know, that doesn't work well for me or my landlord. So what does someone do when that's the investigation process? Obviously, that's not sufficient. Also, second question, is there going to be some sort of liaison process here or liaison person to work between the council and the Sewage and Water Board? I hear a lot of frustration that's justified where it seems like information was not relayed and continues to not be relayed from the Sewage and Water Board to the City Council. I don't know if that works the other way as well, but obviously that's happening in that direction. Is there going to be perhaps a position appointed or some sort of communication route established so that this lack of communication does not continue?
Ms. Garfield, there will be a team evaluating, making an analysis, and that will be part of what we consider.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. And final, go ahead. Tony McCormick.
Yes. I live at 859 Taft Street, and while I have questions concerning my bill, I also correlated all my billing data from 2002 to 2017 and have a lot of discrepancies to ask questions about. My most recent issue is I have been complaining about high water bills, and like everybody else, the standard response from Sewage and Water Board was that was normal use. Well, in 429, El Mansoura, who normally reads our bills, our meters, came out and I talked to her. Well, she got the key, turned the meter off at the city and said, oh, look, your meter's still running. You have a leak on the city side. Call them up. Well, we called. And she said, I'm putting a field report. I'm in the field. I'm putting the report in, but you need to call as well. Have that on my phone. That happened. Nothing happened until June 6th, 10th. My husband was on his way to work and said, you better come out here. There was a 2-foot geyser gushing out of our sidewalk. That's when the Sewerage and Water Board came out. Consequently, our bills kept going higher and higher every month, which I have all the data here, which you're welcome to have a copy. So they came out, repaired it, said the whip was bad. And the supervisor said, don't worry about it, all this water's on us, we're going to take care of everything. And I kept saying, what about 429 and before? Because that's before the geyser, but when the leak was discovered. He said, don't worry. Well, it rained. One day when it stopped raining, my husband on his way to work said, oh, you better come out here. There's water gurgling out of the not yet cemented repaired space. So we called again. We got another crew out. Turns out the first crew, who insisted they were the A-team and knew what they were doing, didn't replace the lead component that was 50, 60 plus years old. And as the connection didn't work, it continued to leak. I had a $600 bill. I don't understand how they adjusted it. They went from $600 to now $200. I have a lot of discrepancies that I think the City Council should look at. It's just billing across the board.
And ma'am, you can share your list with us. I'll send someone down to get it. I'll share it with other council members.
Lots of.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Miller, Mr. Haney, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Certainly.